Okay, the urinary system. Another very detailed body system. I can probably say that all throughout AMP2 lecture. And we're going to start with an introduction. And the overall function of the kidneys is to filter blood. There are also some other functions as far as getting rid of some acid base or regulating that in the blood, as well as blood pressure. And kidneys do regulate how much water stays in the body at a particular time, but the main function would be filtration of the blood. And like it says here, major excretory system of the body, most metabolic waste are transported by the blood to the kidneys to be converted into urine. And that's what we're going to be doing in this section. And a few of the what are called side functions. So starting here are the kidneys. Now these are the adrenal glands that sit right on top of the kidneys. Here's the left kidney, here's the right. These tubes that come down are the ureters. They connect the kidneys to the bladder. Kidneys form urine. The way it gets down to the bladder is through the ureters. And then there's the bladder and there's the urethra. So on our little computer generated man here, you can see there's the left kidney. It is slightly higher than the right kidney. And if you get close, there's the left ureter. You can see it. Here's the right on that side. And if I back up, if I click on the bottom here, it gets super close. And let me hide half of it. Let's see if I can look inside. Let's try that again. There we go. All right, and you can see inside the the bladder actually has rugae, like the stomach. And then you can see down here, if you go a little lower, let me click on that. There is the urethra. So I guess it's not a secret. This is a male example, but I was hoping I could get maybe here. Oop, my bad. Let me try that one more time. There it is. And then it says the internal urethral sphincter. That's interesting. That's the one that's not under voluntary control. I'm going to take away the prostate, and this is the other half of the prostate. And then you can see it. Let me take away the ischium. There it is, right there. It says the urethra, the prostatic portion. There's actually a membranous, the prostatic. Well, there's the membranous. There's a prostatic portion, and then there's the penile urethra. Males, females, of course. The urethra in males is longer, and it's away from skin. So males are less prone to bladder infections because of how far it is away from the skin where the microbes are. So here are some functions of the kidney. Kidneys remove waste from the blood, convert it into urine to be excreted. They also regulate the conversion of useful materials, and that's the part that is kind of complicated. When the kidneys start filtering blood, they filter a lot of substances, basically about everything except for red blood cells. And then, judging on how big you want to call it, 95% get reabsorbed. Reabsorbed meaning it goes from the renal tubes back into the bloodstream in the body again. They do play a role in maintaining water balance. They aid in acid-base balance. I mentioned that. And we'll go through this. This is blood pressure, the renin-angiotensin mechanism. And we covered this with the endocrine. Remember erythropoietin, the synthetic form is EPO. It does help regulate red blood cell production in bone marrow. Vitamin D, which is also something that is obtained from the diet, and kidneys play a role in that. And then they do have the kidneys basically are very sensitive to changes in blood pressure. And that's one of the reasons that this mechanism comes into play, because kidneys have to have a huge amount of blood flow. And let me see if I can show. I should have had this already pulled up. Nope, that's not it. I don't think it's going to be a very big picture. There it is. This is not one of mine. This is a textbook PowerPoint. But see those? This is a guy who's learned how to take plastic and make models from actual human organs from it. But you see that on the bottom. Look at all the little vessels that go into a kidney. So they require quite a bit of the cardiac output and a certain amount of blood pressure. If the blood pressure drops, then the kidneys stop filtering. And then coming out there is the ureter. All right, so here's a quick introduction into what the overall functions of the kidney are.
The structures of the urinary system function to filter blood and remove waste from the body. The kidneys are the blood-filtering organs. Blood enters the kidneys through the renal arteries. Within the kidneys, substances are filtered out of the blood into urinary structures. Some substances are then reabsorbed back into the blood, and others are secreted into the urine. This three-step process cleans blood and creates the waste product urine. Urine exits the kidneys and moves down the ureters to the bladder. As the bladder fills, interactions with the brain and nerves contract and relax muscular structures, and urine is pushed out through the urethra in a process called micturition.
All right, I hope that helped. I apologize for the sound. The kidneys are located retroperitoneal. What that means is they're back against the back wall. I'm going to go to our computer model, and I could go through a lot of clicking and maybe show and take away all the layers, but you can see how they're sitting here, and then here's one of the false ribs. Yeah, they're sitting against the back wall. They're actually covered by a membrane. If you dissect a lab specimen for looking for kidneys, you have to uncover them. They're buried in an adipose layer, and they're behind what is called the parietal peritoneum. Now, the structure of a kidney. Kidneys are reddish brown, bean-shaped with a hilus or hilum, which goes into the kidney. And then you have what are called these three regions. Now, I have a really good, this is a great picture of one here. And let me go back. So, and we'll go through that as well. So, here's a short introduction into all three regions and the parts of the kidney. On general structure of the overall kidney, if we go on this side, you see the color sort of reddish brown. This is actually called the renal capsule. This coming out is the ureter, and so a hilum or hilus is where, for instance, when it's going into an organ, in that case, where the ureter is exiting in that area that goes into a kidney, you can kind of see there a little depression. That's called the hilus. If I go back on the other side, I'm going to back up just a little right there. So this area is called the renal pelvis. Now, if I get closer, let me see if I can get in the middle. I can highlight, it says the renal pyramids, and then I can also highlight this, but let me go over here. There we go. So this whole middle section is called the renal medulla, and this outer layer that has the smaller vessels, you can see them, is called the renal cortex. The areas between the pyramids, here, are called the renal columns. It refers to the tissue between this area called the pyramid. Now, I'm going to click on one of these pyramids, if I can make it in the middle. It's not minding me. Here's the renal pyramid. Renal pyramid made of collecting ducts, and that lighter area is called the renal papilla. And what they are, they're connecting here to these areas. You can see little tube-looking things that are called the minor calyces, or this individual one is a minor calyx. And then you can see how one sort of comes up that way, and then one is kind of coming here. These are the major calyx or major calyces. There's usually two. I've seen models where it looks like they have three, but just that whole area. Then the smaller branches, especially up here. Let's see if I can get my program to mind me. It just keeps wanting to back up. Anyway, I'll get a little closer that way. So there's the minor one. See, there's four right there. Minor calyx or calyces. And then, like I said, here's the ureter. This actually happens to be, if you go all the way to the bottom, this is there's the external urethral sphincter. And up here says the neck of the bladder, and that's the urethra. This is a female urethra. Let me take that off, and then and I'll give you this tour later. Here's the bladder, but you can see the folds inside, and then that coming down there would be the urethra that comes off, and then on the back you can see here's where the ureters are coming in the back of the bladder. All right, so here's some more some textbook learning. I have a couple of examples. This one's good. I did give you an example also of all of the regions, but you can see here it says renal cortex. First of all, you have the renal capsule. So all organs have a capsule by definition. The renal cortex would be this outer layer with all the little bitty arteries and veins. You can see those. The renal medulla is the middle section, and then this area with the yellow that are coming down this way are called the calyces. There's the major and minor calyx. There's two major calyx, and then all the smaller ones are called the minor. Calyx are like little pipelines. So the renal cortex, I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit. Like I was saying, it's all of this outer here. Now these are the pyramids, so you're talking about this outer layer here is all the renal cortex. You can see the renal capsule, and that's where you find nephrons, which the nephron is actually what's called the functional unit of a kidney. Each kidney contains about 1 million nephrons. If you're wondering what's a nephron, it is this guy. It has a renal corpuscle, and then these are called the renal tubules. And then this diagram here is showing, here's the renal cortex. About 80% of all the nephrons are cortical nephrons, and then you have a few that are down lower in the medullary area, or the medulla. All right, so there's there's sort of, and you can see there are different parts. There's 2 parts to a nephron, the renal corpuscle and the renal tubules. And then we'll go through this. There's 3 little things here on a renal corpuscle we need to go through. I'm going to go to there. This is a really good picture. You can see this coming in is called the afferent arteriole, and then this little arteriole leaving is called the efferent arteriole. So you see that area that's all twisted around, and you can kind of see it here. By definition, a glomerulus is a tangled cluster of capillaries. So it comes in this way and makes all these little bends. The blood here is under very high pressure because these are very small. And whatever will fit through the little openings gets pushed into this part that's called the glomerular capsule or Bowman's capsule. And the little yellow looking cells on top, this is a primary process of a podocyte. Those are called podocytes. They're specialized cells that help increase the openings within the glomerulus. The glomerulus is the filter. The renal tubules, and we're going to go through this a little bit detailed more in the next video. There's a proximal convoluted tubule, a nephron loop, and a distal convoluted tubule. I'm going to go just a little bit ahead. Here is, see, here's the renal corpuscle, and you see the little twisted thing in there. That's the glomerulus. And you can see the glomerular capsule. Now, you see this part that looks like a tube rod at Sutterbahn or something. See that going around this way? This is the proximal tubule, or the proximal convoluted tubule. Convoluted means it has bends in it. You can see that. If you follow it down this way, this is called the nephron loop. This is the descending limb, and this part that comes up is called the ascending limb. And you can see this side's a little bit thicker. There's a little different physiology that goes on depending on what part of the loop that filtrate is in. And then this over here is called the distal convoluted or distal tubule, and it connects to this area called the collecting duct. So the nephron would stop here. The nephron is a renal corpuscle, and then all of these tubes all the way to there. The collecting ducts are not part of the nephron. All right, so we did that one, proximal, the nephron, the distal convoluted tubules. Now the renal medulla, just to blow this up a little bit bigger, the renal medulla is this area here that has what are called the renal pyramids, and it also has an area called the renal column. The renal columns, and there are some blood vessels that go up through here. Renal columns are the areas between these, which are called the renal pyramids. Those little areas right there. And the pyramids are made of collecting ducts. So back to our little diagram, you can see it says renal medulla, and you see this coming down that way, the collecting duct. That's what those lines are that you see in the renal pyramid. So urine basically forms out here, and it starts draining down through the pyramids into these little areas here, which is called the renal pelvis. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to go back up. So the middle region of the kidneys, the renal medulla, the renal pyramids, I showed you that. The renal columns is the tissue between the pyramids. And the renal pelvis is the area in the middle here. Well, it's considered the inside, where you have these areas coming together to form the ureter that then leaves the kidney. Now, what you call the very tips of these pyramids are called the renal papilla. They're the apex of these pyramids. So urine is flowing this way, and it dumps into these little smaller areas, called calyx. Now, the minor calyx are these smaller tubes here, and then the major calyx would be like this area here and the area there, just this whole big broad area. This is actually the area that kidney stones form, and that's why they look the way they do. But this is all called the renal pelvis. And then, like I said, urine is going to drain down through these tubes. The calyces are like a tube, and it's all going to collect, and then it starts coming out this way through the ureter. Oops, and I keep doing that. Anyway, that's an introduction and just some anatomy of the kidney. We will start here next.